Quick question. Have you ever watched a movie villain absolutely dominate a scene and caught yourself rooting for them? Yeah, same. Turns out that's not a moral failure. It's psychology. And by the end of this video, you'll know the exact 3 traits behind what people online call villain energy. And trait number 2? You've probably used it this week without even realizing it. Here's the thing nobody tells you. Psychologists have spent decades studying the traits that make fictional villains so magnetic. And they found the exact same traits sitting inside some of the most successful, powerful, and yes, sometimes dangerous real people on the planet. We're talking 3 traits specifically: ruthless focus, strategic selfishness, moral flexibility. Stick with me, because we're going to break down where these traits show up in your favorite movies, where they show up in real headline-making case studies. One of them literally reshaped the map of an entire American city. And by the end, I'll show you how to actually borrow the useful parts of villain energy, without becoming the villain. Let's get into it. Trait 1. Ruthless focus. This is the ability to lock onto a single goal and let everything else, comfort, relationships, other people's feelings, fall away. Think about that ice-cold fashion editor character everyone loves to hate. The one who reduces assistants to tears over a coat, but somehow runs the most influential magazine in the world. Fiction, sure, but that character was reportedly modeled on real fashion executives known for exactly this trait. Standards so high, they become terrifying. And here's the real-life version. Biographers who studied Steve Jobs describe a man who would reduce grown engineers to tears in product reviews, reject work that took months to build in seconds, and refuse to compromise on details most people wouldn't even notice. Uncomfortable? Extremely. But that same obsessive tunnel vision focus is a big part of why the iPhone exists at all. Psychologists actually have a name for the dark version of this. It sits inside something called the dark triad. And don't worry, we're doing a full breakdown of that in a few minutes, because it explains way more than you'd think. But here's the twist that should make you rethink focus as a personality trait. Research on high performers across sports, business, and the arts consistently finds the same pattern. The people at the very top rarely describe themselves as balanced. They describe themselves as obsessed. So villain trait number 1 isn't really about being evil. It's about being willing to disappoint people in service of a goal. Most of us aren't wired for that. Villains, real and fictional, are. But focus alone doesn't build an empire. You need trait 2. Trait 2, and this is the one you've probably used without noticing: strategic selfishness. This isn't "I'm mean for no reason." It's calculated. It's asking, before every decision, what's actually in it for me, and is this worth the cost? There's a well-known movie thriller built entirely around a woman who fakes her own disappearance to punish her husband. Every move calculated 3 steps ahead. Every emotion weaponized for effect. Chilling. But also, structurally, a masterclass in planning. Now here's the real case that's honestly wilder than the movie. A young woman moved to New York, told everyone she was a German heiress with a massive trust fund, and used that story to con banks, hotels, and the city's wealthiest social circles out of hundreds of thousands of dollars. For years, before anyone caught on. She was eventually convicted. But think about what actually worked, psychologically, before it fell apart. Total confidence, zero hesitation, and an ability to make everyone around her feel like they were the lucky ones for being near her. That's strategic selfishness. It's not chaos. It's a cost-benefit calculation running constantly in the background, minus the guilt most of us feel when we prioritize ourselves. And here's the uncomfortable part. Mild, everyday versions of this show up in totally normal negotiations. Salary talks, dating, even splitting a group dinner bill. The person who states their number first, holds it, and doesn't apologize for it, they're using a tiny dose of villain energy. And it usually works. But wait, strategic selfishness only gets you so far before people notice the pattern. That's where trait 3 comes in, and it's the scariest one. Trait 3, moral flexibility. This is the ability to genuinely believe you're the hero of your own story, no matter what you've done. There's a classic story arc. A mild-mannered teacher who slowly transforms into a ruthless criminal empire builder. That resonated with millions, specifically because of the justification stage. Every terrible decision came wrapped in a reason that felt, in the moment, completely rational. It's for my family. I had no other choice. Sound familiar? Now, the real-world version is honestly more disturbing because there were no fictional stakes involved. A Silicon Valley founder built a company promising to revolutionize blood testing, raised over $700 million from investors, and, according to court findings, kept telling investors and patients the technology worked long after internal staff reportedly knew it didn't. She was ultimately convicted of fraud. But here's the psychological detail that should genuinely unsettle you. Multiple people who worked closely with her have said she seemed to actually believe her own story. Not that she was coldly lying, but that she'd convinced herself the ends justified whatever it took to get there. That's moral flexibility at its most extreme. The ability to rewrite your own internal narrative so completely that the line between strategy and deception just dissolves. And this is the trait researchers say is the strongest predictor of what's called Machiavellian behavior, a term that comes from a 16th century political advisor who flat out argued that being feared works better than being loved. So now you've got all three: ruthless focus, strategic selfishness, moral flexibility. Individually, kinda useful. Combined, that's when things get genuinely dangerous. And there's actual science with a name for it. Okay, quick science detour, because this actually explains everything we just talked about. Psychologists have a framework called the dark triad. 3 overlapping personality traits: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. Narcissism, an inflated sense of self-importance. Machiavellianism, strategic manipulation for personal gain. That's our strategic selfishness. Psychopathy, low empathy, high impulsivity, a comfort with risk most people don't have. Here's the part that gets people every time. Studies on business leaders have found measurably higher rates of these traits in corporate executives compared to the general population. Not all executives, obviously, but enough that researchers noticed the pattern and kept studying it. And it makes a twisted kind of sense. A small dose of these traits can look a lot like confidence, decisiveness, and thick skin. Traits that get people promoted. It's only at the extreme end that it curdles into something destructive. Which raises the real question this whole video's been building to. Is villain energy actually useful? Or is it a trap? Let's look at the case that proves it can be both in the same lifetime. This next one is wild, and most people have never heard of him. In the mid-1900s, one man reshaped an entire American city more than any mayor, governor, or president ever did, without ever being elected to that kind of power. He built bridges, highways, parks, and public housing on a scale that's honestly hard to comprehend today. How? Ruthless focus. He worked obsessively, reportedly sleeping only a few hours a night for decades. Strategic selfishness. He consolidated power across multiple government authorities so that literally no one, not even the governor, could easily stop him. And moral flexibility. When his highway projects displaced hundreds of thousands of residents, mostly in lower-income neighborhoods, he framed it as necessary progress, again and again, for over 40 years. The parks and bridges? Still standing, still used by millions of people today. The neighborhoods that got bulldozed to build them, many never recovered. That's the uncomfortable truth about villain energy in the real world. It's rarely pure evil. It's usually a trade-off. Massive achievement on one side, massive human cost on the other, made by someone who was completely convinced they were right the whole time. So, should you actually try to build some of this into yourself? Let's talk about the cost first, because there is one. Here's what the highlight reel never shows you. Every single person we just talked about paid for it. The fraud case ended in prison. The city planner died with his own legacy contested and criticized for decades. Even the positive examples, the obsessive founders and executives, are disproportionately linked in research to burned-out relationships, chronic stress, and isolation. There's actually a psychological term for the version of you at the end of that road. It's called ego depletion combined with relational erosion. Basically, the willpower it takes to constantly override empathy and connection for the sake of a goal eventually runs out, and it takes your relationships with it. So no, this isn't a video telling you to become a fraudster or a highway-building tyrant. It's the opposite. It's about knowing exactly which piece of villain energy is actually worth borrowing. Here's the takeaway, and it's simpler than you'd think. 1. Borrow the focus, not the disregard. Protect your time and your priorities like a villain would. You don't have to bulldoze people to say no to things that don't matter. 2. Borrow the strategy, not the manipulation. State what you need clearly and hold your ground, without needing to deceive anyone to get it. 3. Question your own justifications. The villains we covered today all had a story that made their choices feel okay in the moment. The healthiest habit you can build is pausing to ask, am I actually right, or do I just really want to be? That's the whole formula. Ruthless focus without the cruelty. Strategic selfishness without the deception. And enough self-awareness to catch yourself before moral flexibility turns into moral collapse. So here's the wild part to sit with. The traits that make a great villain and the traits that make a great leader aren't actually that different. It's the guardrails that separate them. And honestly, that's a little unsettling once you notice it in the people around you. Maybe even in yourself. So tell me, ruthless focus, strategic selfishness, or moral flexibility? Which one do you think you already lean into more than you'd like to admit? Drop it in the comments. I actually read every single one. And if this messed with your head a little, you're going to want to watch this next one. It's about the real psychology behind why we can't stop watching villains win in the first place. Right here. Go.